All right, tonight we're going to take a few minutes and look at one of the scriptures that I read on Sunday as we prayed about the whole situation in our country with the coronavirus. I mentioned three scriptures, Psalm 46, Matthew 11, and then we looked at 1 Peter 5:7. So probably over the next 3 Wednesdays, we'll look at each one of those scriptures. Good words for us in this time. Judith Bioris wrote the children's book. You may have it in your library. We have it in ours. It's called Alexander and the Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. In these days of the coronavirus, a lot of people are living that day. Maybe you are. But the Bible can help. And if you've got your Bible handy there at the house, open it up to Psalm 46 or go to your Bible app, Psalm 46. This is a psalm that inspired Martin Luther to write that famous old hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God, a Bulwark Never Failing." And that's exactly what we need when we're overwhelmed by things like the virus and by life. So I want you to listen to the psalm. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. Though the earth trembles and the mountains topple into the depths of the seas, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with its turmoil. There is a river, its streams delight the city of God, the holy dwelling place of the Most High. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her when the morning dawns. Nations rage, kingdoms topple, the earth melts when he lifts his voice. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. Come, see the works of the Lord, who brings devastation on the earth. He makes wars cease throughout the earth. He shatters bows. He cuts the spears to pieces. He sets wagons ablaze. Be still and know that I am God, exalted among the nations, exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Well, talk about a horrible, no good, very bad day. The psalmist was having one of those for sure. Alexander didn't have anything on him. To describe what's happening around him, the psalmist uses the word trouble. It's a word that literally means to be restricted, to be tied up in a narrow, cramped place. We have an expression, between a rock and a hard place. That's what the word is getting at. The psalmist is in trouble. He's between a rock and a hard place. Everything that's nailed down is coming loose. Mountains are collapsing. Waters are surging. Earth is quaking. Nations are warring. Kingdoms are falling. The trouble meter shouts, danger, danger, danger. He's in trouble. So where's he going to go to find help? Where can he turn? Well, he turns to God. God is our refuge and strength, he prays. A very present help in trouble. The psalmist doesn't turn to God, did you notice? Doesn't turn as a last resort. He turns to him right off the bat. He even sings about God, prays about God before he prays about his trouble. God first, before our troubles. He strikes that major chord and then the minor one. He hums the victory march before he sings the blues. The psalmist has trouble, all right. He doesn't deny that. He's fully aware of his trouble, but he's not defined by his trouble. He is defined by the God who is his refuge and strength and very present help in trouble. God is our refuge, our hiding place, our shelter. God's our umbrella when it's pouring rain, our shelter when the bombs are falling and going off around us, our safe house when the hounds of hell are nipping at our heels. God is our refuge. The trouble's bad, but God is greater. God is our refuge, the psalmist prays. Then he prays, God is our strength, means our fortress, our stronghold. God is our rock in a quicksand world. God guards his people, us, like Fort Knox guards gold. God is our strength. The trouble's bad, but God is stronger. God is our strength, and God is our help, our supporter and ally. God is the Calvary that comes to our aid in the nick of time. God is for us, and as Paul asks in Romans, if God's for us, who can be against us. What can be against us? The trouble's bad. We may even feel alone, as some of you might in your sequestered homes these days. But God is there. He is with us still. And God can save us just in time. God is our help and very present help. God is our refuge and strength, declares the psalmist, a very present help in trouble. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. In spite of the fact that this world looks like it's coming apart at the seams, the psalmist sees this stressed out, troubled world in light of God. God is his focus, not his troubles, not his resources, but God, the God who is our refuge and strength and very present help. When we see God clearly, our troubles don't seem near as threatening as they first appeared. So what if the world's all shook up? We're in God's hands and nothing shakes God. So what if the floods are raging? We're in God's lifeboat and it can't sink. So what if enemies attack? We're in God's fortress where the walls are too high to scale, too well defended to breach, and a siege won't work either, for God's fortress, in that fortress are ample food and water, enough to last for eternity. So if you're nearing breakage, don't let your troubles define your life. Let God define your life. Don't focus on your troubles. Focus on God. And the psalmist tells us how to do that. First, he says, pay attention to what God is up to. Come and see the works of the Lord, invites the psalmist. Come see both the desolation and the peace, the hard stuff and the good stuff. Don't deny your troubles. Don't stick your head in the sand. Don't race off to do something else in the hope that mere distraction is going to solve your troubles. Come and see the works of the Lord. See what God is up to in both the good and the bad stuff that's going on in our world and in your life. Does it bother you to think that maybe God is at work in the bad stuff? Old Testament saints believe that somehow God was in everything that happened. We tend to nuance it a little more in a New Testament age. We talk about the direct will of God, that God directly makes some things happen. And we talk about the permissive will of God, where God merely permits some things to happen. Take this virus, for example. While we're quick to say that God gives healing when it comes, we're not always so quick to say that God might have anything to do with the virus coming in the first place. The best we can do with that kind of sickness is to say that God has allowed this sickness to happen. But the Old Testament saints, including the psalmist, they didn't worry about those kind of categories. They didn't split hairs. In their view, God was in all this stuff in one way or another, because sooner and later, as you trace it back, it all falls in the lap of God. So in the psalmist's mind, those falling mountains and surging seas, the shaking earth, the toppling kingdoms were all God's doing in one way or another. Come and see the work of the Lord, invites the psalmist, the desolations that he has brought on the earth. How about your desolations? How about your troubles? Has it ever occurred to you that somehow God could be in these things, maybe to rattle your chain a little, maybe to wring you out a little? Whether your troubles come out of the blue or are of your own making, or maybe the making of others, this psalm challenges us to recognize that somehow God is still in them. And that goes for this coronavirus too. God can use our troubles to get our attention. And we've already seen the toppling of some of our favorite idols in America. Sports, gone. A lot of entertainment, the making of new movies, and gone. Over $100,000 in my 401k, gone. Maybe your troubles come in other directions. But God uses them to get our attention. Maybe a breakdown in our health is his way of saying slow down. Maybe if this is creating family crisis for you, maybe this is God's way of saying get your priorities straight. Maybe if you're grieving the sudden death of someone you love, maybe God is saying you need to pay attention to your soul and to eternity. Maybe your embarrassment or your failure is shouting to you, you're not as important as you think you are. And maybe this virus exposes, as I said, all those idols to show us that we can live without them. Come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he has brought on the earth. God speaks to us in our troubles, even the bad ones. And everybody's heard C.S. Lewis's suggestion that God whispers in our blessings, but he shouts in our pain, that pain is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world to attention. What do you think God is up to in your troubles? What do you think he might be up to in this virus? Sickness, temporary unemployment maybe, a reduced income, 401ks that have much less money now than they had in them just 2 weeks ago. I'm not suggesting that you're going to figure this out with all certainty. I certainly can't. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. So much of this stuff is a mystery to us, and sometimes, honestly, it makes no sense whatsoever. But pay attention anyway. At least that gets your mind and your eyes turned toward God. God, what are you doing? What are you up to? Because the same God who brings desolations, the psalmist says, also brings peace. He makes wars to cease, says the psalmist. He breaks the bow. He shatters the spear. He burns the chariots, the wagons with fire. When your life is hidden with Christ in God, who is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble, then sooner or later, those troubles are going to give way to peace. Your world's going to quit quaking. Your attackers are going to sound the retreat. The battlefield for your soul lies quiet. And even this virus is going to run its course. God does that for his children. He brings relief. He brings stability. He brings peace. But you'll probably never get there if you keep your eyes only on your troubles. Get your eyes on God. You'll get there sure enough when you keep your eyes on God. When you see your troubles through the lens of God. So in dealing with our troubles, in dealing with this virus, the psalmist first invites us to pay attention to what God is up to, and then he invites us to have that peace. Then the psalmist invites us to let God be God. Be still, he says, and know that I'm God. I'll be exalted among the nations. I'll be exalted in the earth. You know, it isn't easy to be still in our culture. You have to go against the grain to be still. But as Clinton McCann points out in his commentary, God calls us to be still. That call is more than a call to relaxation and meditation. We need to read it. He says in light of verse 9, and God's waging peace through the destruction of weapons. So be still could be translated stop or throw down your weapons. In other words, depend on God instead of on yourselves. Or better yet, let God be God. We tend to be victimized by our troubles when we try to play God. I'll run my own life, thank you very much, and we usually make a mess of it. But we don't run our own lives. If anything we've learned in these last few weeks is that this illusion that we have that we control our lives has been shattered in 1,000 pieces. We let culture then sometimes dictate what we do and what we become instead of running our own lives. So why don't we let God just be God? Why don't we let God shape our values? Why don't we let God set our priorities? Be still and know that God is God. Depend on God, not yourself. Cast your cares on him, says Peter, because he cares for you. Scott Wesley Brown wrote a song about this. There is no problem too big. God cannot solve it. There's no mountain too tall. He cannot move it. There's no storm too dark. God cannot calm it. There's no sorrow too deep. He cannot soothe it. If he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, I know, my brother, my sister, he can carry you. And this applies to the virus as much as any other trouble that besets us. Let God be God in your life. Let him carry you. The key is to focus on God instead of our trouble, instead of this virus. Henry Nouwen wrote about meeting Mother Teresa. Wow, those are two powerful names in recent Christian history. He met Mother of Teresa. I think he met her in Calcutta. Nouwen went to see her because he was struggling with so many things in his life, and he decided to use the time to ask Mother Teresa's advice. Honestly, it's hard for me to think Henry Nouwen ever needed to ask anybody for advice. But like the rest of us, he had his issues too. And so he went to someone he thought was a little farther down the road than him spiritually, Mother Teresa. And as soon as they sat down, Nouwen started explaining all of his problems and all of his difficulties. Life was so complicated, he said. He was feeling so much stress. After 10 minutes of unburdening himself with his troubles and his complaints, Nouwen became silent. Mother Teresa looked at him and quietly said, "Well, when you spend 1 hour a day adoring your Lord and never do anything you know is wrong, you will be fine." All those miles of traveling to get that simple yet profound counsel. Her advice punctured Nouwen's big balloon of complex complaints, and it pointed him beyond himself to the place of real healing. Nouwen had raised a question from below, and she had given him an answer from above. Her answer came from God's place and not from the place of Nouwen's complaints. Like most of us, Nouwen was looking for an answer from below. Do this, read that, try this relaxation technique, get this time management thing going. An answer from below, but no, Mother Teresa offered an answer from above. When you spend 1 hour a day adoring the Lord and never do anything wrong, you will be okay. Like the psalmist, she challenged him to focus on God instead of his troubles. I want to encourage you to do that in this weird and crazy season of COVID-19. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. Be still and know that I'm God, because the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold.